Nobody wanted the fat black maid until the millionaire said, "She's the one." For years, she was ignored, mocked, and treated like she didn't matter. But in one shocking moment, in front of the entire wealthy crowd, everything changed. The millionaire didn't just notice her, he claimed her. And that's when the whispers started. Was it love? Was it a scandal? Or was it something even deeper? Because when her little boy looked up at him and whispered, "Mommy says you're my daddy," the room froze. Now, the truth could shatter reputations, tear families apart, and change her life forever. Will this woman finally be wanted for who she is, or will the world tear her down before she gets her chance? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The alarm clock's gentle chime broke through the darkness at 4:30 in the morning. Clarissa Johnson's eyes fluttered open, her body heavy with exhaustion from yesterday's work. But there was no time to linger in bed. With practiced movements, she pulled herself up, her feet finding their way to the worn carpet below. In the small kitchen of their modest apartment, Clarissa moved quietly, not wanting to wake Micah too early. The morning light hadn't yet touched the window panes as she mixed pancake batter, adding a sprinkle of cinnamon, Micah's favorite. The familiar scent filled their tiny kitchen, bringing warmth to the cool morning air. "Mama?" Micah's sleepy voice carried from his bedroom. He appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes, still in his Superman pajamas. "Good morning, baby." Clarissa smiled, flipping a perfectly golden pancake. "You're up early today." Micah climbed onto a kitchen chair, his small feet dangling. "Do you have to go to work again?" "Yes, sweetheart, you know Mama has to work. But why can't you get a better job?" His innocent question pierced her heart. "Jenny's mom works in an office with a computer and everything." Clarissa set a plate of pancakes in front of him, shaped like Mickey Mouse, just the way he liked them. "The Lord has a plan for all of us, Micah. Sometimes we just have to be patient and faithful while He works things out." "But..." "No buts," she said gently, kissing his forehead. "Now eat up, Mrs. Martinez will be here soon to take you to school." Later that morning, Clarissa stood in the gleaming kitchen of the Harrington estate, her uniform pressed despite the early hour. Around her, other maids whispered and giggled, their eyes darting in her direction. "Did you see how much she ate at break yesterday?" One whispered, not quite quietly enough. "Well, look at her," another replied with a smirk. "She clearly never misses a meal." Clarissa kept her head down, focusing on polishing the already spotless counter. The words stung, but she wouldn't let them see her pain. Instead, she silently prayed for strength, her lips moving in quiet supplication. Mrs. Harrington swept through the kitchen in her designer suit, phone pressed to her ear. She walked right past Clarissa as if she were part of the furniture, gesturing with her free hand at a nearly invisible spot on the floor. "Make sure that's cleaned properly," she said to no one in particular, never making eye contact. The day dragged on, filled with endless tasks and silent slights. When evening finally came, Clarissa sat on the bus, holding her paycheck close. The envelope felt thin for all the hours she'd worked, but it would have to do. Streetlights flickered past the window as she gazed out into the darkness. "Lord," she whispered, her breath fogging the cold window, "I know you see me, even when nobody else does. Please show me the way forward. Give me strength for Micah's sake." The bus rumbled on through the night, carrying her home to her sleeping son and another day of the same tomorrow. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Harrington estate as Clarissa wiped down the antique side tables in the main hall. Her movements were careful and precise, just as they had been every morning for the past 3 years. The peaceful routine shattered when Mrs. Harrington's shrill voice echoed through the corridors. "This is absolutely unacceptable." Mrs. Harrington burst into the hall, her designer heels clicking against the floor. "The charity gala is tonight, and 2 servers have called in sick. What are we supposed to do now?" The head housekeeper wrung her hands. "We've called the agency, Mrs. Harrington. but they're short-staffed too. Mrs. Harrington's eyes swept the room, passing over Clarissa, as if she were part of the furniture. Then, slowly, almost painfully, her gaze returned. What about her? The head housekeeper's nose wrinkled. Clarissa? But she's just a cleaning maid. Better than having empty hands at the gala, Mrs. Harrington snapped. Tell her she'll need to serve tonight. As soon as Mrs. Harrington left, the whispers started. Clarissa kept her head down, pretending to focus on her work, but each word stung like a paper cut. Can you imagine her trying to balance those fancy appetizer trays? She'll probably knock everything over. The guests will think we're desperate. Clarissa's hands trembled slightly as she folded her cleaning cloth. She thought of Micah's words from yesterday morning. You're the best mama in the whole world. She straightened her shoulders, remembering how her son looked at her with such pride, even when others looked right through her. During her lunch break, Clarissa sat alone in the staff room, picking at her sandwich. The other maids clustered at the far table, their laughter sharp and pointed. One of them, a thin blonde woman named Tracy, called out, "Hope you don't trip over your own feet tonight, Clarissa. Those trays can be so heavy." Clarissa closed her eyes briefly, letting a quiet prayer slip through her lips. Lord, give me strength to face whatever comes my way. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparations. Clarissa changed into the required black and white uniform, which felt tight and uncomfortable. She tugged at the collar, trying to make it sit right, while the other staff members hurried past her with barely concealed smirks. At 6 o'clock, Clarissa stood by the staff entrance, waiting for the shuttle that would take them to the hotel where the gala was being held. The evening air was cool against her face, and she could hear crickets beginning their nightly chorus. "Dear God," she whispered, clutching her small purse close to her chest, "please give me the courage to get through this night with dignity." The shuttle's headlights appeared at the end of the driveway, and Clarissa took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders as it pulled up to the curb. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow shadows across the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel. Ladies in designer gowns twirled like exotic birds, their jewelry catching the light. The air hummed with classical music and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. Clarissa stood near the kitchen entrance, her hands trembling slightly as she balanced a heavy tray of dirty plates. The new shoes the housekeeper had forced her to wear pinched her feet, and sweat trickled down her back beneath the too tight uniform. "Watch where you're going," Tracy hissed as she brushed past, deliberately bumping Clarissa's elbow. A water glass wobbled on the tray, but Clarissa steadied it just in time. The other servers moved through the crowd like dancers, their steps light and practiced. Clarissa felt like a bull in a china shop, carefully picking her way between clusters of chattering guests, who acted as if she were invisible. Near the dessert table, she heard snippets of conversation. "Did you see that large server? How desperate must they be tonight?" A titter of laughter followed. Clarissa swallowed hard and kept working. "Lord, just help me get through this evening," she whispered under her breath. Then she heard it, a strange choking sound. A little girl in a pink party dress was clutching her throat, her face turning red. The child's mother screamed, "Help! Someone help!" Without thinking, Clarissa set her tray down with a clatter. She rushed forward, pushing through the crowd that had frozen in panic. The little girl's eyes were wide with fear. Clarissa positioned herself behind the child, wrapped her arms around the small waist, and performed the Heimlich maneuver. One thrust, two thrusts. On the third try, a piece of candy shot out of the girl's mouth. The ballroom fell silent except for the child's gasping breaths. The mother burst into tears, hugging her daughter close. "That was extraordinary," a deep voice said. The crowd parted, and a tall man in an expensive suit stepped forward. His silver hair gleamed in the chandelier light, and his blue eyes were kind but penetrating. Clarissa recognized him from charity newsletter photos. Daniel Whitmore, the millionaire philanthropist. He studied her face intently, as if seeing something others had missed. Then he smiled, a warm, genuine expression that transformed his serious features. "She's the one," he declared, his voice carrying across the hushed ballroom. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tracy dropped a champagne glass, and it shattered on the marble floor. Mrs. Harrington's mouth fell open in shock. Clarissa stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding. For the first time that evening, perhaps for the first time in years, everyone in the room was looking at her, really seeing her. The silence in the grand ballroom felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Clarissa's hands trembled as she stood there, still catching her breath from performing the Heimlich maneuver. The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting dancing lights across the faces of stunned party-goers who moments ago had been pretending she didn't exist. "She's the one," Daniel Whitmore had said, his deep voice carrying across the marble floors. A titter of nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. One woman in a sequined gown whispered behind her hand to another, their eyes narrowed with judgment. Clarissa felt her cheeks burning, wishing she could disappear into the shadows where she belonged. Daniel stepped forward, his tailored suit a stark contrast to her simple uniform. His kind eyes met hers directly. "Miss Johnson, I've been looking for someone to manage my estate, someone with quick thinking, genuine care for others, and unshakable character. Tonight, you've shown all three." More whispers erupted. A group of wealthy women near the chocolate fountain exchanged looks of pure horror. One of them, wearing pearls that probably cost more than Clarissa's yearly salary, actually clutched her chest as if having a spell. "But she's just a," someone started to say, before Daniel raised his hand for silence. "I know talent when I see it," he said firmly, "and I know character." Behind the dessert table, Clarissa caught sight of two other maids pointing and snickering. One made a cruel gesture about her size when she thought no one was looking, but Daniel noticed everything. "Miss Johnson, I'd like you to come to my office next week, Monday at 10 o'clock. We'll discuss the details of your new position." He handed her a business card, his fingers steady and sure. Clarissa managed to find her voice. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. I'm honored." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of sideways glances and whispered conversations. The wealthy guests treated her like a curiosity now, rather than invisible. She wasn't sure which was worse. Later that night, Clarissa sat on the edge of Micah's bed in their small apartment, telling him about everything that had happened. His big brown eyes grew wider with each detail. "You saved somebody, Mama?" he asked, clutching his worn teddy bear. "Yes, baby. God put me in the right place at the right time. And that rich man wants to give you a better job?" Micah's face lit up with hope. "Does this mean things are gonna change?" Clarissa pulled him close, breathing in the sweet smell of his freshly washed hair. For the first time in years, she felt something dangerous stirring in her heart. "Hope, maybe, baby," she whispered, holding him tight. "Maybe they are." Clarissa stood at the wrought iron gates of the Whitmore estate, her fingers nervously smoothing down her best dress. 7-year-old Micah bounced excitedly beside her, his small hand warm in hers. The mansion loomed before them, its white columns stretching toward the cloudless sky. "Mommy, it's like a castle." Micah's eyes widened as they walked up the curved driveway. Her heart fluttered as she approached the massive front door. Before she could ring the bell, it swung open to reveal Daniel Whitmore, dressed casually in a light blue button-down shirt and khakis. "Mrs. Johnson, welcome." His smile was genuine, warming his eyes. "And this must be Micah. Please, come in." The foyer took Clarissa's breath away. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, dancing across marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Yet something about it felt oddly familiar, like déjà vu she couldn't quite place. "Let me show you around," Daniel said, leading them through the house. "This would be your primary workspace." As they moved from room to room, Clarissa found herself anticipating the layout before they entered each space. The library with its floor-to-ceiling shelves, The conservatory filled with lush plants. The kitchen with its gleaming copper pots hanging overhead. You seem to know your way around, Daniel noticed, raising an eyebrow. I'm not sure why, but it all feels familiar somehow, Clarissa admitted, her voice soft. They reached the grand staircase, its mahogany railings gleaming in the afternoon light. Micah, who had been unusually quiet during the tour, suddenly tugged on Daniel's sleeve. Mister? Micah's innocent voice pierced the quiet. Mommy says you're my daddy. The words hit like a thunderbolt. Clarissa's face drained of color, and she swayed slightly on her feet. Daniel froze mid-step, his hand gripping the banister. I never said that, baby, Clarissa whispered, mortified. Her heart hammered against her ribs as memories she'd tried to bury came rushing back. Daniel turned slowly, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Mrs. Johnson, he said quietly, I think we need to talk about this. Clarissa's hands trembled as she clasped them together. The familiar walls suddenly felt like they were closing in. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. How could she explain something she'd spent 7 years trying to forget? Daniel's steady gaze held hers, waiting for an answer that could change everything. Clarissa sank into one of the plush chairs in Daniel's study, her hands twisting in her lap. Micah had fallen asleep on a leather couch nearby, exhausted from the afternoon's excitement. It was 7 years ago, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I was 19, pregnant, and homeless. My family had turned their backs on me when they found out about the baby. Daniel leaned against his desk, listening intently as she continued. One cold night, I was sitting outside that little diner on 4th Street, Johnson's family restaurant. You probably don't even remember, but you were leaving after a late dinner. You saw me there, shivering, tears welled in her eyes. You gave me $200 and went back inside to buy me a hot meal. Recognition flickered across Daniel's face. I do remember that night. You were just a child yourself. That kindness meant everything to me, Clarissa said. When Micah was growing up, he'd ask about acts of kindness, and I'd tell him that story, about the kind man who helped his mama when she needed it most. I never said you were his father, Mr. Whitmore. Never. He must have just imagined it that way. Before Daniel could respond, his phone buzzed repeatedly. His face darkened as he checked the screen. The gossip's already spreading, he said grimly. Someone must have overheard Micah. Within hours, the whispers turned into a roar. Clarissa's phone lit up with cruel text messages from the Harrington estate staff. Gold digger, they called her. Using your kid to trap a rich man. The comments about her weight and race were even uglier. Local gossip columns posted speculative articles online. Millionaire's secret love child. Daniel Whitmore's hidden past exposed. Photos of Clarissa and Micah leaving the mansion appeared on social media, with vicious comments beneath them. Daniel's social circle buzzed with judgment. How dare that woman make such claims? They whispered at their country club lunches. And did you see the size of her? Daniel would never. That evening, Clarissa tucked Micah into bed, her heart heavy. Mama, why are people being mean? He asked sleepily. I just thought. Since you said he was so nice. Sometimes people say unkind things when they don't understand, she explained gently, kissing his forehead. But God understands, and that's what matters. Later, in her own bedroom, Clarissa knelt beside her bed. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she prayed. Lord, give me strength to face these whispers. Protect my sweet Micah from their cruelty. Help me find the courage to endure this storm, just as you've helped me through every other trial. She wiped her eyes and continued praying. Her words carried on the night breeze that rustled through her window, seeking comfort in her unwavering faith despite the growing scandal around her. Despite the swirling rumors and scandal, Daniel Whitmore stood firm in his decision. On a bright Monday morning, He personally helped Clarissa and Micah move their modest belongings into the staff quarters of his estate. The apartment, though smaller than the main house, was larger than their previous home, with 2 bedrooms and windows that overlooked the sprawling gardens. "I hope you'll both be comfortable here," Daniel said, watching as 7-year-old Micah bounced excitedly on his new bed. "It's like a castle, Mommy," Micah exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. Clarissa's first day as household manager started with clear resistance from the staff. Mrs. Peterson, the cook who'd been with the household for 15 years, barely acknowledged her presence. The housekeepers exchanged pointed looks when she gave instructions, and the groundskeeper simply walked away mid-conversation. But Clarissa remained steady, drawing on her deep well of patience and faith. When Mrs. Peterson struggled with a heavy pot, Clarissa quietly stepped in to help. When one of the housekeepers mentioned her sick mother, Clarissa adjusted the schedule without being asked. Small acts of kindness, one after another. By the end of the first week, Mrs. Peterson left a fresh-baked muffin on Clarissa's desk. "Made too many," she muttered, but there was a hint of a smile in her eyes. Meanwhile, Micah transformed the gardens into his personal wonderland. Daniel often watched from his office window as the boy explored, his laughter carrying through the air. Sometimes, Micah would wave enthusiastically, and Daniel found himself waving back, a warm feeling spreading in his chest. "Your son brings life to this place," Daniel commented one afternoon, finding Clarissa organizing the weekly schedules. "He has a gift for joy," she replied softly. "Sometimes I think he gets it straight from heaven." As the sun began to set that evening, Daniel discovered Clarissa in the kitchen, preparing tea. The staff had gone home, and the house was quiet except for the gentle clinking of cups. "Would you join me?" she offered, surprising them both with her boldness. Daniel settled at the kitchen island, watching as she poured the tea with graceful movements. They talked about simple things, the garden's needs, Micah's adventures, the upcoming week's schedules. Then Clarissa shared a story about Micah's morning antics, imitating his excited voice, and suddenly Daniel was laughing, really laughing, for the first time in years. The sound startled them both into silence. Daniel touched his throat, as if unsure the sound had come from him. Clarissa smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes, and something shifted in the air between them. In that moment, surrounded by the comfortable quiet of the kitchen and the lingering echoes of laughter, Clarissa felt a spark of something she hadn't dared hope for in years: belonging. The late summer sun painted golden highlights across the estate's sprawling lawn as Clarissa spread a checkered blanket beneath a towering oak tree. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years, watching 7-year-old Micah chase butterflies through the freshly cut grass. Daniel sat beside her, his sleeves rolled up casually, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him in his usual business attire. "The chicken salad is delicious," Daniel said, helping himself to seconds. "I can't remember the last time I had a proper picnic." Clarissa beamed, smoothing her simple yellow sundress. "My mama's recipe. She always said good food brings people together." Micah ran back to them, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Look what I found." He held up a perfect dandelion puff, its seeds ready to scatter in the breeze. "Make a wish," Daniel encouraged, his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. Just then, the click of expensive heels on the garden path made Clarissa tense. Mrs. Bradford, their wealthy neighbor, appeared with her designer handbag and judgmental stare. "Well, isn't this quaint?" Mrs. Bradford said, her smile sharp as cut glass. "Daniel, darling, I hardly recognize you sitting on the ground, like common folk." Before Clarissa could shrink into herself, Daniel's voice rang out clear and firm. "There's nothing common about sharing a meal with people you care about, Margaret. Would you care to join us? Clarissa's chicken salad is exceptional." Mrs. Bradford's face pinched like she'd bitten into something sour. "No, thank you. I was just passing by," She hurried away, her heels stabbing the manicured lawn. Micah plopped down between them, oblivious to the tension. "Daddy, can you help me blow my dandelion?" The word hung in the air. Clarissa's breath caught, waiting for the awkward correction that usually followed, but Daniel just smiled, a gentle light in his eyes as he leaned closer to Micah. "Of course, buddy." On the count of 3, something warm unfurled in Clarissa's chest as she watched them blow the seeds together, sending wishes dancing on the breeze. The afternoon stretched like honey, sweet and slow, filled with simple joys, shared sandwiches, cloud watching, and Micah's delighted laughter. Later that evening, Clarissa sat at her small desk in their quarters, a candle flickering beside her as she opened her journal. Her pen moved across the page, giving voice to the hope she'd been too afraid to name. "Dear Lord," she wrote, "today felt like a gift I never dared ask for. For the first time, I didn't feel like the maid nobody wanted. I felt chosen. Daniel looks at me like he sees me, really sees me. Not my size, not my color, just me. Is this the door you've been preparing my heart for? I'm scared to hope, but I'm more scared not to. Thank you for this day, for Micah's joy, for Daniel's kindness. Help me trust wherever this path leads." Monday morning dawned crisp and clear as Clarissa walked hand in hand with Micah toward Oak Ridge Elementary School. Her son skipped along beside her, his Batman backpack bouncing with each step, chattering about the science project he couldn't wait to show his class. As they approached the school gates, Clarissa's heart sank at the sight of the usual cluster of well-dressed mothers gathered near the entrance. Their designer handbags and perfect manicures made her feel even more conscious of her simple clothes and worn purse. "Did you hear?" One woman whispered loudly enough for Clarissa to hear. "She's actually living at his estate now." "Gold digger," another hissed. "I mean, look at her. What else could Daniel Whitmore possibly see in someone like that?" "Poor Daniel," a third chimed in. "First his wife dies, now this woman, taking advantage of his grief." Micah's small hand tightened around Clarissa's as they passed the group. Her cheeks burned, but she held her head high, just as her mama had taught her. "Good morning, ladies," she said quietly, refusing to let them see her pain. Inside the classroom, Clarissa's heart broke watching Micah sit alone. 2 boys pointed and laughed, whispering, "That's the maid's kid who pretends he's rich now. My daddy says your mom's trying to steal Mr. Whitmore's money," another child taunted. Back at the estate, Daniel paced his study, his face drawn with worry. A letter from his late wife's family's lawyers lay open on his desk. The words seemed to mock him. "Legal action. Protect the family legacy. Questioning your judgment." The phone rang. His former sister-in-law, Catherine. "Daniel, be reasonable," she pleaded, her voice dripping with fake concern. "What would Elizabeth think? That woman is clearly after your money. We'll fight this in court if we have to." "The inheritance. That's enough." Daniel cut her off, his voice firm but weary. "Clarissa is a good person. She makes me happy, Catherine, for the first time since Elizabeth. She's using you, Daniel. And that child? Please, it's obvious what she's doing." When school ended, Clarissa found Micah huddled on a bench behind the playground, his small shoulders shaking with sobs. Her heart shattered as she gathered him into her arms. "Why are they so mean, Mama?" He whimpered into her shoulder. "Tommy said I don't belong here anymore. He said we're just pretending to be special." Clarissa held him tighter, her own tears threatening to fall. "Baby, we are special. Don't you ever forget that." But as she stroked his hair, doubt crept into her heart like a shadow. Was she being selfish, exposing her precious boy to all this cruelty? Maybe they were better off before, invisible but safe. The weight of the whispers, the judgment, the threats, it all seemed too heavy to bear. "Maybe we should go home," she whispered, more to herself than to Micah, her voice trembling with uncertainty. The sun was setting behind Daniel's estate, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn as he and Clarissa stood in his study. His normally confident posture seemed almost pleading now as he faced her. "We can handle this together," Daniel said firmly, his hand reaching for hers. "I don't care what they say about us." Clarissa pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. Tears welled in her eyes as she watched a group of wealthy neighbors walking past the window, their disapproving glares cutting through the glass. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Every day, my baby comes home crying because the other children won't play with him. They call him names, tell him his mama's trying to steal their daddy's money. I'll speak to the school," Daniel insisted, moving closer. "We'll make it right." "And what about your reputation? Your business?" Clarissa's voice cracked. "Your late wife's family is threatening legal action. I heard what they said about the inheritance." "Money isn't everything, Clarissa. What we have here, you, me, and Micah, that's real. But I can't let my son grow up like this." Clarissa burst out, the tears finally spilling over. "Every day, he faces shame and ridicule. Every single day, someone makes him feel less than. I won't do that to him. I won't let him carry that burden." Daniel's face hardened with determination. "Love is worth fighting for. We can stand against them together." "Love?" Clarissa laughed bitterly. "Love won't stop them from destroying your life. Love won't protect Micah from their cruelty. Sometimes," she paused, choking back a sob, "sometimes love isn't enough." "Don't say that," Daniel pleaded, his usual composure cracking. "We can find a way." But Clarissa was already shaking her head. "I have to leave. It's the only way." Later that night, in their quarters at the estate, Clarissa quietly packed their belongings into 2 worn suitcases. Micah sat on his bed, hugging his favorite stuffed dinosaur, watching with confused eyes as his mother folded their clothes. "Why do we have to go, Mommy?" he asked in a small voice. Clarissa paused, a shirt clutched to her chest. She crossed the room and knelt before her son, pulling him close. "Sometimes, baby," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears, "sometimes love is not enough." After tucking Micah into bed one last time in the estate, Clarissa lay in her own bed, staring at the ceiling. The tears she'd held back all evening finally broke free, soaking her pillow as she cried silently in the darkness. Each sob felt like it was tearing her heart apart, but she knew she had to be strong, for Micah, for herself, even if it meant walking away from the first real chance at happiness she'd had in years. Clarissa stood in the doorway of their old apartment, the key feeling heavy in her hand. The familiar musty smell and worn carpet brought back memories she'd tried to forget during their time at the estate. Micah dragged his small suitcase inside, his shoulders slumped. "Mama, why can't we go back?" he asked, his voice small and confused. "I miss the big garden, and Mr. Daniel." Clarissa's heart clenched as she set down their bags. Sometimes things just don't work out like we hope, baby." She couldn't bring herself to explain how the cruel words and judgmental stares had worn her down, how she'd left to protect both Daniel and Micah from the ugliness of people's prejudice. The next morning, she was back to scrubbing floors and cleaning bathrooms in different houses. Her hands grew raw from harsh cleaning chemicals, and her back ached from bending and lifting. Each night, she came home exhausted, her feet burning, to find Micah waiting with questions she couldn't answer. "Did Mr. Daniel do something bad?" he asked one evening while picking at his dinner of macaroni and cheese. "No, sweetheart," Clarissa said, fighting back tears. "Mr. Daniel is a good man. That's why we had to leave." Across town, in his massive estate, Daniel sat alone in his study, staring at the empty chair where Clarissa used to sit during their evening talks. The house felt colder without her warmth, emptier without Micah's laughter echoing through the halls. He'd tried calling, but she wouldn't answer. The staff whispered about her departure, some gleeful, others genuinely sad to see her go. The gossip grew worse after she left. Some claimed she'd tried to blackmail Daniel. Others suggested she'd been caught stealing. Each new rumor felt like a knife in Clarissa's heart when it reached her ears through old contacts at the estate. One particularly difficult evening, after Micah had fallen asleep, Clarissa knelt beside her bed. The springs creaked as she lowered herself to her knees, and the thin walls let in the sound of traffic from the street below. Tears streamed down her face as she clasped her hands together. "Lord," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I don't understand. I thought you were opening a door for us, but now everything's falling apart. Please show me what to do. I'm trying to protect everyone, but my heart," she choked back a sob, "my heart is breaking. Give me strength. Show me the way." The silence of the room pressed in around her as she waited, hoping for an answer, for some sign that she'd made the right choice. But only the distant sound of sirens and the soft breathing of her sleeping son filled the darkness. The Grand Meridian Hotel's ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and polished silverware. Clarissa moved between tables with practiced care, her server's uniform scratching against her skin. As she balanced heavy trays, she kept her eyes down, trying to blend into the background during the community development meeting. The room buzzed with Hampton's elite, the same people who had whispered and sneered about her just weeks ago. Ladies in designer suits sipped water with lemon, while men in tailored jackets discussed property values and social standings. Clarissa's hands trembled slightly as she refilled water glasses, remembering their cutting remarks about her weight, her skin color, her audacity to dream above her station. The meeting droned on about neighborhood improvements, until a familiar voice cut through the murmur. Clarissa nearly dropped her tray. "I'd like to address something more important than property values," Daniel Whitmore said, rising from his seat at the main table. His voice carried authority, but there was a gentleness in it that made Clarissa's heart ache. The room fell silent. Everyone knew about the scandal, the maid who'd dared to capture Daniel Whitmore's attention, who'd fled with her young son. For years, Daniel continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. "I've sat in meetings like this, discussing wealth and status while ignoring what truly matters. But someone taught me about real courage, about facing judgment with grace and dignity." Clarissa stood frozen by the service door, clutching her tray like a shield. Daniel's gaze found her, and his eyes softened. "Clarissa Johnson showed me what true strength looks like," he declared. "And yes, I love her. I love her kindness, her faith, her resilience in the face of cruelty." His voice grew stronger. "And Micah? That beautiful, honest child? I would be honored to call him my son." Gasps rippled through the best breast. Proud. Mrs. Hampton Brooks dropped her fork with a clatter. Daniel stood taller, his shoulders squared. "You've whispered about her, mocked her, tried to shame her away. But wealth without compassion is meaningless. Your expensive clothes and imported cars can't match the richness of her character." Clarissa's vision blurred with tears. She watched through them, as Daniel risked everything: his reputation, his social standing, his business connections, all for her. Her hands shook as she set down her tray, tears falling freely now. "I don't care about your approval." Daniel's voice rang out. "I care about love, real love, the kind that sees past appearances and social classes, the kind Clarissa has taught me exists." The silence in the room was deafening. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others stared at their plates. But Daniel stood firm, his eyes never leaving Clarissa as she wept quietly by the service entrance, his declaration of love echoing in her heart. The silence that followed Daniel's declaration was broken by scattered murmurs. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged knowing smirks. Mrs. Vanderhilt, one of the town's most prominent socialites, made a show of gathering her designer purse, ready to storm out. But before she could leave, Pastor Elijah Brooks rose from his seat near the back of the room. His dignified presence commanded attention as he cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitmore speaks truth," he said, his deep voice resonating through the ballroom. "And I, for one, stand with him. The pastor's words carried weight. He was respected across all social circles, known for his wisdom and integrity. In my 63 years of ministry, I've seen how prejudice and pride can poison hearts, but I've also seen how love and faith can heal them. More people began nodding, including several business owners who had initially seemed ready to distance themselves from Daniel. The pastor continued, "The worth of a person isn't measured by their bank account or their appearance, but by the content of their character." From her hiding spot behind the column, Clarissa felt someone gently touch her arm. It was Mrs. Peterson, one of the kinder servers who had always shown her kindness. "Go on," she whispered, giving Clarissa a gentle push forward. "They need to hear your story too." Clarissa's legs felt like jelly as she stepped into the light. The room hushed as she made her way to the front. Standing near Daniel but not quite beside him, she took a deep breath, remembering all the prayers that had carried her through dark times. "I never wanted to cause trouble," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I've spent my whole life trying to be invisible, thinking that was safer. But God had other plans." She shared about raising Micah alone, about enduring cruel words with dignity, about choosing forgiveness over bitterness. As she spoke, something remarkable happened. The sneers began to fade. Several women dabbed at their eyes with silk handkerchiefs. Even Mrs. Vanderhilt slowly sank back into her chair, her expression softening. Across the crowd, Clarissa's eyes met Daniel's. In that moment, everything else faded away. The whispers, the judgment, the fear. His gaze held such pure love and pride that it took her breath away. It was a look that said more than words ever could, a silent promise of forever that no amount of social pressure could break. The morning sunshine streamed through Clarissa's modest kitchen window, catching dust motes in its golden rays. She was washing breakfast dishes when the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped. These days, unexpected visitors brought both hope and anxiety. On her doorstep stood Mrs. Henderson and 3 other women from the community, clutching gift baskets and wearing contrite expressions. "Clarissa, dear," Mrs. Henderson began, her voice thick with emotion, "we've come to apologize. We were cruel, and we were wrong." Over the next few days, more neighbors arrived, each bearing gifts and genuine remorse. The local garden club invited her to join. The PTA personally asked her to help organize the spring fair. What touched Clarissa most was seeing Micah come home from school with a bright smile, talking about playing with his new friends at recess. Even Daniel's former in-laws retreated from their threats. His late wife's sister called to say they'd been wrong to judge so harshly. "Daniel deserves happiness," she admitted quietly. "And so do you." One ordinary Tuesday evening, Clarissa stood at her kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for dinner. Daniel had come over, as he often did now, sitting at her small table while Micah did homework. The domesticity of the moment filled her heart with quiet joy. "Clarissa," Daniel said softly, pushing back his chair. She turned to find him on one knee, holding not a fancy ring box, but her hand in his. "I could have planned some elaborate proposal at a 5-star restaurant, or hired a skywriter," he said with a gentle smile. "But this, right here in your kitchen, with Micah nearby, surrounded by the simple beauty of our everyday life. This is us. This is real." Tears welled in Clarissa's eyes as he continued, "I love you for exactly who you are. Your strength, your faith, your incredible heart. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered through joyful tears that sparkled like diamonds. "Yes, with all my heart." The patter of small feet interrupted them as Micah burst into the kitchen. Homework forgotten, he launched himself into Daniel's arms, nearly knocking them both over. "Now I have a real family," he exclaimed, his face glowing with pure happiness. Daniel gathered them both into his embrace, their laughter and tears mingling in the warm kitchen light. It wasn't a fairy tale ending in a grand castle. It was better. It was real love, built on faith, understanding, and acceptance, flourishing in the most ordinary of places. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across Daniel's estate gardens, where rows of white chairs faced an elegant flower arch. The simple decorations, strings of twinkling lights and mason jars filled with wildflowers, transformed the grounds into a magical setting that perfectly matched Clarissa's understated beauty. In her dressing room, Clarissa smoothed her hands over her ivory gown. It wasn't extravagant, but the flowing fabric made her feel like a princess. She caught her reflection in the mirror and, for the first time in years, truly saw herself, not as the maid nobody wanted, but as a woman worthy of love. "Mommy, you look like an angel," Micah exclaimed, bouncing into the room in his tiny tuxedo. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he hugged her carefully, mindful of her dress. The ceremony began as the sun started its descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Neighbors who had once whispered cruel words now sat with genuine smiles, moved by the journey that had brought them all here. Even Mrs. Henderson, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, couldn't hide her emotion. When the music started, Clarissa emerged from the estate's French doors. Instead of walking alone, Micah stood between her and Daniel, their hands clasped together. The three of them walked down the aisle as one, symbolizing the family they were already becoming. There wasn't a dry eye in the gathering. The pastor spoke of love's power to transform hearts, of faith that moves mountains, and of redemption that comes to those who remain true to themselves. As Daniel and Clarissa exchanged vows, Micah wrapped his arms around both their waists, completing their circle of love. As the sun painted its final strokes across the horizon, casting long shadows across the estate's lawn, Clarissa turned to Daniel. Her eyes shimmered with happy tears as she whispered, "Nobody wanted me until you said I was the one. Now, I finally believe it myself." Daniel pulled both Clarissa and Micah into a tight embrace, their family circle complete at last. The gathering of guests burst into applause, celebrating not just a wedding, but the triumph of love over prejudice, of faith over fear, and of truth over appearances. They held each other close as the sky turned to twilight, their hearts full with the knowledge that this was just the beginning of their story together. A story of a family bound not by obligation, but by choice, by love, and by the grace that had brought them together. Thanks for spending a moment here with me. If this story touched you, let's keep this connection going. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.